Imagine waking up to headlines you never thought you'd see. Hollywood's darkest secret exposed in shocking leak. This wasn't just a rumor or another celebrity scandal. It was something much bigger, something that could completely shift the power dynamics in an industry that's controlled the world's entertainment for over a century. What if I told you this exposed didn't come from a random blogger or anonymous whistleblower? No, it came from within the very walls of Hollywood itself. The elites were panicking. They didn't expect this. What could have been so big? Stick around, because I'm about to tell you how the top executives, producers, and A-list stars are scrambling after this shocking leak. And trust me, this is just the beginning. I'll tell you this much. You're going to want to stay tuned for what comes next. Trust me, this is only the tip of the iceberg. What do you think about all these leaks? Do you think the elite Hollywood system will finally come crumbling down, or is this just another blip? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay updated on everything going down behind the scenes. Why now? The leaks had started to take on a life of their own. What started as a trickle of information quickly turned into a flood. But what made this different from every other scandal in Hollywood history? It wasn't just about what was being exposed, but who was involved. You'd never guess it. Some of Hollywood's most iconic figures, the ones who've spent decades building their public personas, were suddenly shrouded in scandal. The very people you'd expect to be standing up for justice were the same ones profiting from a system that thrived on secrecy and exploitation. And I'm not just talking about big-time executives or producers. We're talking about A-list stars who had you believing they were the good guys. But let's break it down. The shocking revelations. Among the leaked documents, several names kept popping up. Names you might not expect to be connected to these shady dealings. And no, I'm not just talking about the actors you see on the red carpet. Take, for example, a powerful director who had been secretly influencing casting decisions. This director wasn't just picking the best talent. Oh no. Instead, they had a team of private agents working to ensure only those who would benefit their personal agenda got the roles. Talent and experience? That barely mattered. And then there were the producers, the real puppet masters behind it all. They controlled the budgets, the script rewrites, the publicity, and most importantly, the talent. But not in a way you'd expect. These producers were demanding control over their stars' personal lives, what they said in interviews, who they could date, even how they acted in public. They didn't want just control over the movie. They wanted control over their brand. What shocked people the most was that this wasn't an isolated issue. No, this was part of a larger pattern. The deeper you dug into these leaks, the more connections you found between some of the biggest names in Hollywood, all tied together by a shared, corrupt system that kept the truth from ever getting out. The heroes turned villains? It wasn't just the directors or producers who were being exposed. Some of Hollywood's biggest stars were now being accused of turning a blind eye to the corruption, or worse, benefiting from it. There was one particularly famous star who had positioned themselves as a champion for social justice, only to be exposed for covering up an incident that, if revealed, could have completely derailed their career. The public was furious, feeling betrayed by someone they thought was an ally. It was like the curtain had been pulled back, revealing a world that was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The people we thought we knew, the ones who represented hope and change, were now just players in a system designed to keep them in power. And the worst part, they didn't want anyone to know. The fallout. The public reaction was swift and intense. Hollywood wasn't prepared for this. The elites, who had once been untouchable, found themselves scrambling to protect their image. The damage was irreparable. People started to question everything. The movies they watched, the celebrities they admired, the events they attended. All of it seemed tainted. The system had been manipulating them for so long that they didn't even realize it. But what's more fascinating is that this wasn't just the beginning. It was a warning. Because if Hollywood could pull something like this off, what else were they hiding? The public wanted answers, and they weren't about to let Hollywood off the hook this time. The elites thought they could keep their secrets hidden, but now, they were fighting an uphill battle. And trust me, this was far from over. What do you think about the heroes being exposed as villains? Are these celebrities really as innocent as they claim, or is Hollywood built on deception? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to keep uncovering these shocking truths, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The storm was brewing. Once the leaks had hit the public, the fallout was inevitable. The internet exploded. Fans were furious, and Hollywood itself was scrambling to keep everything under control. But here's the kicker. The elites weren't just trying to protect their secrets. They were fighting for their very survival. As the revelations continued to spread like wildfire, those in power in Hollywood were faced with an uncomfortable truth. The public wasn't buying the lies anymore. The trust was broken. And once trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild, especially when the stakes are as high as they were here. A bitter divide. What happened next was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Hollywood was divided. On one side, you had the elites, the directors, producers, and A-list stars who were trying to downplay the scandal, claiming it was all just a misunderstanding or the work of overzealous whistleblowers. But on the other side, you had the public, the fans who had supported these celebrities, watched their movies, and followed their every move for years. They were outraged, and they weren't ready to forgive. The internet was ablaze with conspiracy theories, hashtags calling for accountability, and a relentless push for transparency. People weren't just angry. They were demanding answers. Hollywood tried to spin the situation, but the more they tried to defend themselves, the deeper the hole they dug. And then, things took an even darker turn. The backlash wasn't just public. It was personal. The silent pushback. Some of the celebrities who had been involved in the scandal tried to stay quiet, hoping the storm would pass. But silence didn't help. In fact, it made them seem even more guilty. The public wasn't letting them off the hook that easily. On top of that, there were those who publicly defended the Hollywood system, claiming that the leaks were just the work of disgruntled ex-employees or upset talent. They painted themselves as victims of an industry they claimed to be a part of. But the truth was clear to anyone paying attention. This wasn't about a few bad apples. This was a system, a carefully constructed machine that had been operating under the radar for years, if not decades. And it wasn't going to be swept under the rug so easily. The elites began to feel the pressure. The lawsuits started pouring in. Celebrities were losing sponsorships. Directors were being blacklisted. The truth had become their worst nightmare. The Hollywood elites fight back. Hollywood wasn't going down without a fight. Those who had once held all the power were now on the defensive. The lawsuits and public relations teams went into overdrive, trying to spin the narrative back in their favor. But here's where it got interesting. The pushback wasn't just from the Hollywood elite. It came from inside. Some stars, who had once been too afraid to speak up, started to break their silence, revealing what they knew about the system and its corruption. One particularly famous actor came forward with a detailed account of how they had been manipulated by producers and directors, forced into roles they didn't want, and coerced into public appearances to save face for the industry. It was a turning point. The tides began to shift. The public started to realize that maybe, just maybe, not all the stars were complicit. And that's when Hollywood realized they had a bigger problem on their hands. Not only were they facing a public backlash, but now they were at war with their own. What's next for Hollywood? So, where does Hollywood go from here? Can they truly recover from this massive scandal? Or is this the beginning of the end for the old guard? One thing is certain. Change is coming. Whether Hollywood is ready for it or not, the truth has been exposed, and the public isn't going to let them forget it. But what does that mean for the future of the industry? Will it finally be held accountable for all its shady dealings? Or will this just be another momentary storm that gets forgotten once the next big blockbuster drops? I guess we'll find out soon enough. What do you think? Do you think Hollywood will be able to weather this storm, or will it change forever? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want to stay updated on all the latest developments, make sure to subscribe. This story is far from over. As the dust settled, the public had one pressing question. How deep does this corruption really go? For years, Hollywood had managed to present itself as a shining beacon of glamour, creativity, and entertainment. The stars, the movies, the luxury, it was all part of the carefully crafted illusion. But now, that veil had been lifted, revealing a dark underbelly that most never imagined existed. Behind the scenes, Hollywood was less about the art of filmmaking and more about power, manipulation, and profit. The public didn't just want answers. They wanted to understand how the system had thrived for so long without anyone noticing. The system of control. What was revealed next was chilling. Hollywood's elite didn't just control the movies. They controlled the narratives. They didn't want fresh, new voices in the industry. They wanted people who could be easily molded to fit their agenda. You see, the system wasn't just about making money. It was about creating stars who could be manipulated. From the casting couch to personal endorsements, these stars weren't just playing roles. They were playing into a larger narrative constructed by powerful producers, directors, and agents. Even the scripts were manipulated. Stories weren't about creativity or pushing boundaries. They were about control. Scripts were written to ensure that certain individuals came out on top, while others were kept in the shadows. It was a machine that ensured that only certain people had the power to make decisions, while the rest stayed beneath their feet. The power of influence. It wasn't just about what was happening on screen. It was about the influence these elites held in the real world. Hollywood's power stretched far beyond the red carpet. Celebrities weren't just influencing moviegoers. They were influencing public opinion, politics, and even culture. Think about it. The same stars who made millions were also dictating trends, setting social norms, and even pushing political agendas. But here's the catch. Most people didn't realize they were being manipulated. Take one instance. A well-known director who was publicly advocating for social change was exposed for running a network of manipulation behind the scenes. This director had been using their platform to push a specific agenda, one that benefited them and their circle, rather than the causes they claimed to support. People started to see the disturbing pattern. Hollywood wasn't just making movies. It was creating puppets for the masses. The public had been fooled into thinking that everything happening on screen was authentic. But in reality, it was all part of a well-orchestrated show. The fall of the icons. As the truth about the system of control came to light, the public felt a betrayal so deep it was hard to ignore. The celebrities, the ones they had admired and even worshipped for years, were now revealed as puppets in a larger game. The images of perfection they projected were nothing but facades, carefully constructed by teams of managers, agents, and PR experts. What was even more shocking was the complicity of the public. They had watched and cheered for these stars without questioning the system behind them. They'd bought into the lie that these celebrities were real, that their stories were their own. The truth? It was all scripted. Now, those same stars were trying to play the role of the victim, acting like they didn't know the extent of the manipulation. But was anyone buying it? The public had already seen too much. The cracks were too wide, and the walls of Hollywood's carefully constructed image were crumbling down. The road to redemption? But here's the twist. Not all was lost. Some of these stars, realizing the damage had been done, started to take a hard look at their own roles in this system. Some were genuinely trying to make amends, publicly calling for change and pledging to be more authentic moving forward. But can Hollywood really change? Is it even possible to break free from a system that has been operating for so long? Or are we looking at a mere rebranding, with Hollywood continuing to push the same old agenda, but with a slightly different narrative? This is only the beginning. If Hollywood doesn't take a hard look at itself, it could be facing the end of an era. But can the system really be changed, or is the entire industry too deeply rooted in corruption? Let me know your thoughts below. How do you think Hollywood will respond to the truth that's been exposed? And if you want to see how this plays out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next chapter. With every piece of the puzzle that was uncovered, it became clear. The extent of the manipulation wasn't just a few bad apples. It was an entire system. And the deeper we dug, the more terrifying it became. For years, Hollywood's elite had been operating in the shadows, pulling strings, manipulating the public, and ensuring that the right people stayed on top. But now, the secret was out. Scandals were spilling into the open, and the true nature of this exclusive world was becoming harder to ignore. The alleged cover-up. One of the most shocking revelations came when a top-tier executive was accused of orchestrating a massive cover-up. It wasn't just about making sure certain stars were protected. It was about destroying careers and silencing anyone who dared to speak out. This wasn't just about shady dealings behind the scenes. It was about actively working to keep the truth hidden from the public for decades. The more we heard, the worse it got. Former insiders came forward, detailing how they were pressured into staying silent, how they were blacklisted if they didn't comply with the system's demands, and how anyone who dared to speak up was silenced, sometimes with intimidation, other times with bribes. And the worst part? They weren't just silencing the people who spoke out. They were also controlling the narrative in the media. It wasn't enough to keep people in check behind the scenes. These elites had to ensure that their version of events was the one the public saw. The exposed deals. What followed were explosive exposés about underhanded deals, manipulative contracts, and backdoor dealings that showed just how far Hollywood's elites were willing to go to keep their dominance. These weren't just minor agreements, but life-altering deals that involved entire careers. Actors, directors, producers, all were involved in some way, whether it was turning a blind eye to questionable behavior or taking advantage of young talent. The web of connections seemed never-ending. The question wasn't just who was involved, it was who wasn't. These deals didn't just affect the stars. They had ripple effects across the industry, with thousands of people caught in the aftermath. Crew members, technicians, and everyday workers found themselves shut out of opportunities simply because they didn't play by the elite's rules. The fallout from these revelations was huge, and it was only getting started. Hollywood's reckoning. As the accusations piled up, the question on everyone's mind was, what happens now? Could Hollywood survive this? Could it rebuild itself from the ashes of its own corruption? Or had the damage been done so deeply that there was no coming back? Some stars were taking a stand, using their platform to publicly call out the injustices, demanding accountability for the decades of abuse and manipulation. But were their calls for change enough? Could the system that had been built over decades be brought down with a few social media posts and public outcries? And what about the public reaction? The audience that had once admired these stars was now questioning everything. How could they trust the very industry that had lied to them for so long? Were these stars really who they said they were? Or were they simply products of a machine that manufactured their fame and persona for its own gain? The final twist. Just when you thought it couldn't get any more shocking, another bombshell dropped. A well-known journalist revealed a new piece of the puzzle. That the elites were not only manipulating the careers of actors, but also influencing politics and social movements. They weren't just controlling the entertainment industry. They were shaping the future in ways that had gone completely unnoticed by the public. This was more than a scandal. It was a reckoning. Hollywood was staring down the barrel of a revolution, and it wasn't clear if it could survive the fallout. The stars, the movies, the culture, everything had been built on manipulation and lies. But could this empire withstand the truth, or was this the beginning of the end? The next chapter will reveal just how far Hollywood's elites will go to protect their empire. Will they fight back, or will the truth continue to pour out? If you're as curious as I am, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the next explosive chapter. With the public uproar reaching a fever pitch, the Hollywood elites had one choice: fight back or risk losing everything. But they weren't going to let the truth destroy their empire without putting up a fight. Behind closed doors, a group of powerful figures began to make moves, strategic, calculated, and with one goal in mind: keep control. The counter-narrative. It didn't take long for a counter-narrative to begin circulating. Hollywood's elite weren't about to let the flood of bad press go unchallenged. Suddenly, their most loyal stars and executives were all coming forward with deflections. They had their own stories to tell now. This wasn't a scandal about corruption and lies. No, according to them, The real story was about the horrible betrayals from former insiders and the need to protect the industry from a handful of disloyal outcasts. This new narrative was well-crafted, packaged, and pushed out across media outlets. Stars that had been accused of wrongdoing suddenly appeared in interviews, speaking passionately about their commitment to the craft, their dedication to art, and how the public's perception of them was being distorted by a few rogue voices. It wasn't just about deflecting the blame. It was about shifting the focus back to the good Hollywood had brought to the world. They were trying to convince us that the real story was about the magic of film, the inspiration it had provided for generations, and how their world had been turned upside down by a few bad actors who now wanted to burn it all down. But were these voices genuine? Or were they just desperate attempts to salvage the last remaining shred of their empire? The power of money and influence. Hollywood has always been a place where money and influence reign supreme. And as the scandal continued to spiral, those in the highest positions of power began pulling out all the stops to quash the dissent. Huge sums of money were funneled into PR campaigns designed to rewrite the narrative. Former insiders who had previously spoken out began disappearing from the public eye. It wasn't a coincidence. It was clear that some people had paid the price for speaking out against the powerful. And it didn't stop there. The industry was also using its connections to politicians, influential journalists, and even major media outlets to steer the public conversation in a more positive direction for Hollywood. They weren't just hiding behind closed doors. They were actively controlling the narrative at every level. But the more they tried to control the narrative, the more people began to question their motives. If everything was really just a misunderstanding, why were they working so hard to suppress the truth? What were they trying to hide? A new battle line. As the tension grew, a new battle line began to emerge. This wasn't just about Hollywood elites trying to protect their image anymore. Now, it was about public trust, about whether the public would believe the elites or stand behind the whistleblowers who had exposed the truth. The question on everyone's mind was, who could you trust? The media, often viewed as a mouthpiece of the powerful, was now at the center of the controversy. Could they be trusted to tell the truth? Or were they simply repeating the narratives fed to them by Hollywood's most powerful figures? And then came the social media revolution. Celebrities, influencers, and everyday people began speaking out, using their platforms to voice their opinions and demand accountability. This was more than just a battle for Hollywood's reputation. It was a fight for the soul of the industry itself. The world was watching, and they wanted answers. The clock is ticking. As Hollywood's elites desperately clung to their old ways, time was ticking. With every new revelation, the pressure was mounting. Could they maintain control of the narrative? Could they keep the public from fully waking up to the depths of their manipulation? It seemed like no matter how hard they tried, the truth was slipping through their fingers. The more they pushed back, the more people were starting to see through their tactics. Hollywood's grip on the public's imagination was loosening, and it was unclear whether the industry could ever recover from the damage done. But what happens next? What will Hollywood do to keep from falling apart completely? Will the elite succeed in silencing the dissenting voices, or will the public demand something much bigger? You won't want to miss the next chapter. If you've been following along, you know things are just heating up. Hit subscribe if you're ready for the next shocking twist. As the scandal raged on, something curious started happening. For every whistleblower coming forward with stories of corruption and exploitation, there seemed to be a silent majority. A group of people who weren't ready to speak out, but were starting to question what they saw. Was everything really as it seemed? Or was there a hidden agenda at play? Hollywood, known for its glitzy allure and endless access to wealth and power, had always been a place of dreams. Yet, with the growing revelations of the darker side of the industry, the public's disillusionment was palpable. But instead of confronting this new reality head-on, the Hollywood elites tried to manipulate the masses, subtly nudging them to remain loyal to the idea of Hollywood magic. They pushed for people to look past the ugly truths and instead remember the iconic films, the star-studded red carpets, and the legacy Hollywood had built for over a century. The power of public perception. The Hollywood elites knew one thing. Public perception is everything. If they could convince the public to look the other way, to return to the comfort of the glitzy movies, the celebrity gossip, and the red carpet events, they could survive this scandal. So, they made their move. Behind the scenes, high-powered PR teams began crafting a series of heartfelt statements and public apologies. Stars who were previously silent now took to social media, posting videos about how they had learned from their mistakes, promising to do better, and asking for forgiveness. These apologies were a well-oiled machine designed to restore faith in the system. But not everyone was buying it. The public's growing doubts. Despite the carefully crafted apologies, there was an underlying sense of skepticism. People were starting to wonder if these stars were truly sorry, or if they were just trying to cover their backs. Was the apology genuine, or just a performance to get back in the public's good graces? The truth was, many began to see through the Hollywood facade. The public started asking questions. Why was the industry so quick to apologize, yet so slow to change? Why were there no real consequences for those responsible for the scandal? And why, after all of this, were these celebrities still the ones at the top of the food chain, the rising voice of the people? As the elites worked tirelessly to shape the narrative, the public's voice grew louder. Celebrities who had once been untouchable now found themselves in the crosshairs of public opinion. Fans, influencers, and everyday people took to social media to demand more real change. They were no longer willing to accept just an apology or a few empty promises. They wanted to see action, and they wanted it now. Hollywood had always relied on the loyalty of its fans, but now it was clear that this loyalty was being tested. The more the elites tried to manipulate the public perception, the more they alienated the very people who had once idolized them. It became clear that the world wasn't just watching. They were judging. The backlash grows stronger. The backlash continued to build. Celebrities and industry insiders who had long turned a blind eye to the darker side of Hollywood were now being called out for their complicity. The public was no longer willing to accept the standard narrative of Hollywood magic. People were starting to demand accountability, not just for those at the bottom of the industry, but for those at the very top. The ones who had known about the corruption all along. But just as the public's disillusionment seemed to reach a boiling point, Hollywood's elite had another trick up their sleeve. They began to target the new voices of resistance, discrediting them, undermining their credibility, and painting them as radicals or outsiders who were simply trying to tear down an institution that had given so much to the world. They painted themselves as the victims in this story, shifting the narrative once again. The clock is ticking. The question was no longer whether Hollywood could survive. It was whether they could win back the trust of the public. Could they successfully spin this narrative and regain their power? Or was this the beginning of the end for the golden age of Hollywood? As the controversy continues to unfold, one thing is certain. Hollywood is fighting harder than ever to keep its secrets hidden. But the truth is slipping through their fingers, and the world is watching. Will the elite succeed in shifting the tide, or will the resistance continue to gain momentum? Stay tuned for the next chapter. You won't want to miss how this all unfolds. Don't forget to subscribe if you're following this story. Things are just getting interesting. By now, it was clear that Hollywood's shiny surface was beginning to crack. What had once been a world of untouchable stars and flawless performances was now being exposed for all its flaws. But the real question everyone was asking, how much more could the public handle before they turned away for good? The power of whistleblowers. In the wake of mounting public pressure, a group of whistleblowers finally decided they had enough. For years, they had stayed quiet, fearing retribution from the powerful figures that ran the industry. But now, with the public demanding answers, they were ready to speak out. These weren't just industry outsiders. These were insiders who had seen it all, from the shady deals to the questionable practices that kept Hollywood running behind the scenes. These whistleblowers were brave, and their testimonies were bombshells that shattered the carefully constructed image of the industry. One after another, they came forward, revealing stories that were nothing short of shocking. The world had always suspected something was off, but hearing these first-hand accounts made it undeniable. Hollywood was not just a place of dreams. It was a machine of manipulation. The story behind the glamour. As these stories flooded the media, the public began to peel back the layers of the Hollywood facade. The glitz and glamour were no longer enough to distract them. The stars on the red carpet, many of them were puppets, controlled by powerful figures behind the scenes who were pulling the strings. The movies we watched, the stories we loved, the celebrities we adored, they were all part of an intricate web of control that kept the industry's secrets hidden. The more the whistleblowers revealed, the harder it became for the elites to maintain their grip on the public narrative. Hollywood had always prided itself on its mystique, but now that mystique was being slowly replaced by the harsh light of truth, the silence of the elites. As the revelations grew, something curious started to happen. The usual voices of Hollywood, the A-list celebrities, the directors, and producers who had once dominated the news cycle with their every move, went silent. Where were the usual apologies and carefully scripted responses? Why weren't these powerhouses rushing to defend themselves against the allegations? It was as if they had become too paralyzed by fear to speak. The public's outrage was palpable, and for the first time, Hollywood's elites realized they were no longer in control of the narrative. The story had grown too big. The machine they had built to manipulate and distract had started to fall apart. The shift in power. Hollywood's long-held monopoly over the entertainment world was slowly slipping away, and new players were stepping into the scene. Independent filmmakers, streaming services, and social media influencers. People with no ties to the old guard of Hollywood were becoming the new voices of influence. Authenticity was now the driving force. The public, once so enchanted by the allure of Hollywood, was now looking for something real, something untainted by the scandal. This wasn't just a shift in the entertainment industry. It was a cultural awakening. The masses were no longer blindly following the narratives Hollywood fed them. They were questioning everything they had been told and demanding a new kind of content. Content that didn't come with a side of corruption and deceit. The end of the golden era? As the days went on, it became more and more apparent that the golden era of Hollywood might be drawing to a close. The industry's carefully constructed image had been shattered, and the public was no longer willing to ignore the cracks. The elites were scrambling, trying to salvage what was left of their power, but it was a losing battle. This wasn't just about celebrities anymore. It was about the future of an entire industry. Hollywood's monopoly on the entertainment world was being challenged, and it was unclear who would come out on top. Would the old guard manage to regain their control, or would this be the dawn of a new era of transparency and authenticity in entertainment? Where will Hollywood go from here? With the public's trust all but gone, the Hollywood elites found themselves at a crossroads. Could they rebuild their empire, or had they pushed the public too far? The road ahead was uncertain, and only time would tell if Hollywood could rise from the ashes of its scandalous past or if it would be forever tarnished by its secrets. So, what's next for Hollywood? Will the industry ever regain the trust of its fans, or has it truly reached its breaking point? Don't miss the next chapter, where we dive into the hidden alliances that may change everything. If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. This story is far from over. In the midst of all the chaos and fallout, a new reality began to emerge. The power behind Hollywood wasn't just in the hands of the public figures or the elites we saw on screen. It was in the hands of those operating in the shadows, the silent players who had been pulling the strings all along. The media, once thought to be an ally to the public, had now shown itself to be more of a tool for controlling the masses than informing them. But who were these mysterious figures controlling the narrative? What were their true motivations? The real puppet masters. Behind every major Hollywood production, behind every massive celebrity endorsement, were hidden corporations and lobbying groups that held far more sway than anyone ever imagined. These were the groups that controlled the flow of information, dictated which movies got made, and shaped public opinion. They weren't concerned with art or creativity. They were concerned with profit and influence. As these shadowy figures began to come to light, it became apparent that they had been the true power players all along. They weren't interested in protecting celebrities or preserving the image of Hollywood. They wanted to control the culture, influence global markets, and shape society's values. And the best part, most of us never even realized they were there. The secret deals. In the aftermath of the Hollywood exposure, investigators uncovered a series of backdoor deals that explained how certain movies got greenlit while others were buried without a trace. These weren't decisions based on talent or creativity. They were decisions based on who you knew and how much money you could bring to the table. These alliances weren't just about movies. They were about power. From the studios to the talent agencies to the media conglomerates, every piece of the puzzle was designed to keep the power concentrated in the hands of a select few. This wasn't just business as usual. It was a well-oiled machine of influence and control that went far beyond the screen. The Hollywood machine exposed. As more details about these secret alliances came out, the public was left to grapple with a terrifying realization. Hollywood's influence over society had been far more insidious than anyone could have imagined. The movies and shows we watched weren't just entertainment. They were carefully curated narratives designed to shape our beliefs, our values, and even our politics. This machine wasn't just about selling tickets. It was about selling ideals, about making us believe in a version of reality that suited the interests of the elites. The shifting power dynamics. With the public now fully aware of these hidden alliances, a new wave of change began to take shape. The very people who had once been at the mercy of Hollywood's power were now pushing back, demanding to know the truth. Celebrities who had been complicit in these deals were finding themselves caught in the crossfire. Many tried to distance themselves from the scandals, but the damage had already been done. Meanwhile, new players from outside Hollywood began to make their move. Independent filmmakers, content creators on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, and even social media influencers were starting to rise to prominence. These new figures didn't have the backing of the old alliances, but they had one thing that Hollywood no longer had: the trust of the audience. And slowly, but surely, this new wave of creators started to shift the power dynamics. The elites, once untouchable, were now starting to feel the pressure from a public that was no longer willing to stay in the dark. The future of Hollywood. What's next for Hollywood? Will it finally reform and break free from the clutches of these secret alliances? Or will it continue to operate behind the scenes with the same old power brokers pulling the strings? One thing's for sure. The public is watching closely now, and they won't forget so easily. But there's more to this story. The next chapter will reveal even deeper secrets about the industries that feed off Hollywood's success and how they're all interconnected in a web of power that goes far beyond the movies. If you're ready to hear the next bombshell, make sure you're subscribed. Things are only getting started. The dust had barely settled from the chaos of Hollywood's exposure when a new wave of revelations came crashing down. The truth was finally out. The very foundation of the entertainment industry had been built on lies, manipulation, and ruthless ambition. Hollywood, as we knew it, was falling apart, and the elites who once controlled it were now fighting to hold on to their fading power. But what happened next wasn't just about the fall of the old guard. It was about what came after. As the curtain began to fall on the classic Hollywood system, a new world was emerging, one where power, influence, and storytelling were in the hands of the people. The end of the old guard. For decades, the Hollywood elites had ruled over the entertainment world, dictating what the public saw and heard. They had controlled the narratives, shaped perceptions, and ensured their own success while keeping the public in the dark. But when the truth came to light, everything changed. Suddenly, the studios that once held all the power were scrambling to salvage their reputation. The agencies that had controlled the careers of A-list stars were now struggling to stay relevant in a rapidly changing industry. The elites who had been untouchable were now facing the consequences of their actions. Public trust had been shattered, and their influence began to wither away. The rise of the new media. As the old guard crumbled, new voices began to rise. Independent filmmakers, YouTubers, and social media influencers, people who had once been dismissed as outsiders, were now claiming their place at the center of the entertainment world. With the public's trust in Hollywood at an all-time low, these new creators brought something that Hollywood could no longer offer: authenticity. While the elites were focused on maintaining control, the new wave of creators were focused on something much more powerful: connecting with their audience. They didn't have the fancy studios or the massive budgets, but they had something more valuable: the ability to speak directly to the people. No PR teams, no filters, just raw, real content that resonated with viewers on a personal level. The power shift. It wasn't long before the balance of power began to shift. What had once been a top-down industry, where the elites made all the decisions, was now becoming a democratic space. With the rise of digital platforms and social media, creators had direct access to millions of people without the need for a middleman. Hollywood's monopoly on storytelling was over. This was the moment when Hollywood realized that it had underestimated the power of the people. The public wasn't just passive consumers. They were active participants in the narrative. And with their voices now heard louder than ever before, the entertainment industry had to adapt or get left behind. What's next for Hollywood? So, what's next for Hollywood? Will it continue to fight the rise of independent creators and influencers, or will it evolve into something new? One thing is certain: the game has changed. The elites who once controlled Hollywood no longer have the same grip on the public. The power has shifted, and now it's in the hands of the audience. As the future unfolds, one thing is clear: Hollywood will never be the same. The road ahead, as Hollywood redefines itself, it will face a crossroads. Will it listen to the people and embrace a new, more authentic way of creating and consuming media? Or will it try to hold on to its old ways and continue to fight a losing battle? Whatever happens next, one thing is for sure: the public's eyes are wide open and they won't forget. Hollywood's reckoning has only just begun. And with that, we conclude this series. If you found this story eye-opening and want to stay up to date on more shocking revelations, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The world of entertainment is changing fast, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.